The great space station floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most moons, with lights that sparkled like diamonds across its metal surface. This was the home of the Galactic Council, where creatures from hundreds of different worlds came to talk and make peace. Today, something was very wrong. Ambassador Zexthul walked quickly through the long hallways. His 6 legs clicked on the smooth floor as he hurried to the meeting room. Behind him, his assistant struggled to keep up while carrying a large stack of papers and data tablets. "Sir, are you sure about these numbers?" the assistant asked, breathing hard. "I have checked them 5 times, Zexthul said without stopping. "The pattern is clear and very troubling." They reached the great meeting hall, where 847 different species had their seats. The room was huge, with a dome ceiling that showed the stars outside. Representatives sat in groups based on what kind of air they breathed or what gravity they needed. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and some were just glowing balls of light. At the center of the room was a raised platform where speakers could address everyone. Zexthul climbed the steps and waited for silence. "Fellow beings," he began, his voice echoing through the vast space. "We face a crisis unlike anything in our recorded history. For 6 months, humanity has completely stopped talking to us." A wave of surprised sounds filled the room, clicking, buzzing, and strange musical tones as different species expressed their shock. "What do you mean, stop talking?" asked Ambassador Veltar from the Aquatic Union. Her words came through a water-filled helmet that let her breathe. Zexthul activated a large screen behind him. Numbers and charts appeared, showing communication records from the past year. 6 months ago, humans began pulling back from everything, he explained. They quit 3 major research projects without explanation. They called back every single ambassador from every world. They stopped answering our messages completely. The screen showed a graph that started high and then dropped to 0. The line stayed at 0 for 6 straight months. "Every trade offer we send gets no response," Zexthul continued. "Every invitation to meetings gets ignored. Every attempt at communication meets total silence. It is as if humanity has decided we no longer exist." An elderly representative from the Silicon Collective spoke up, his rocky voice grinding like stones. "Perhaps they are simply busy with internal matters. Humans are known for their focus on their own affairs." "That is what we thought at first," Zexthul replied, "but the situation is more serious than that." The screen changed to show a map of known space. Red dots marked human colonies and ships. Blue lines showed their usual travel routes. "Human ships have been spotted in areas where no one has ever been before," Zexthul said, pointing to distant regions of the map. "They travel alone, always avoiding contact with other species. When our ships try to approach them, the humans simply vanish." "Vanish how?" asked a representative from the hive mind worlds. "They use their faster-than-light travel in ways we have never seen. Our best scientists still cannot understand how their ships move through space so quickly. When they want to disappear, they just do." The room filled with worried chatter. Many species had tried for years to understand human technology, especially their amazing ability to travel between stars faster than anyone else. "There is more," Zexthul said, raising his voice to get attention again. 3 weeks ago, we detected strange energy readings from the edges of human space. Our long-range sensors show massive construction projects on planets they have never built on before. They are building something big, and they are doing it in secret. A representative from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance stood up. She was tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the room's lights. "Have we considered that the humans might be preparing for war?" she asked. "Perhaps they see a threat that we do not." "Against whom?" Zexthul asked. "We have checked with every major power in the galaxy. No one has threatened humanity. No one has even had contact with them recently." The room fell quiet. Everyone was thinking about what this might mean. Could they have found something dangerous in those unexplored regions? Suggested another representative. Something that scared them into hiding? We thought of that too, Zexthul said. But our deep space probes have found nothing unusual in the areas where humans have been traveling. From the back of the room, a strange, melodic voice spoke up. It belonged to one of the ethereal collective, beings made of pure thought and energy. We have attempted to understand human intentions through mental contact, the ethereal said. What we discovered is most disturbing. Everyone turned to look at the floating, glowing form of the ethereal representative. For the first time in our species' history, we cannot read human minds at all. It is not that they are actively blocking us. It is as if their consciousness has been wrapped in something that our thoughts cannot touch. We have never encountered anything like this. The silence that followed was heavy and frightening. The ethereal collective could read the minds of almost every thinking being in the galaxy. If they could not touch human thoughts, something was very wrong. What are you suggesting? Zexthul asked. We do not know, the ethereal admitted. But in all our years of study, only two things can block mental contact completely. Either the mind has been destroyed, or it has been changed into something we cannot recognize. Fear spread through the room like a cold wind. Representatives began talking urgently among themselves in dozens of different languages. Zexthul raised all 6 of his arms for silence. We must decide how to respond, he said. Humanity is one of the younger species in our community, but they are also one of the most powerful. Their technology is advanced, their military is strong, and their colonies are spread across a large part of the galaxy. We cannot simply ignore them. What do you propose? Asked the representative from the Trade Federation. We must send a delegation, Zexthul replied. A group of our best diplomats backed by a peaceful fleet. We will go to human space and demand answers. We will not leave until they explain what is happening. Some representatives nodded agreement. Others looked worried about approaching humans who were clearly trying to stay hidden. And if they refuse to talk to us? Asked the Aquatic Union ambassador. Zexthul looked around the great hall at all the different faces, forms, and energy beings that made up the Galactic Council. Then we will have to consider that humanity may no longer be our friend, he said quietly. And we will have to decide what to do about that. The meeting continued for hours, but one thing was clear to everyone present. The galaxy had changed, and humanity's silence was just the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous than any of them could imagine. 3 weeks after the emergency meeting, the largest peaceful contact fleet in galactic history moved toward Earth's solar system. 50 ships from 20 different species flew together in perfect formation. At the front was the diplomatic vessel Harmony, commanded by Ambassador Selandra of the Kalari people. The Kalari were famous throughout the galaxy for their ability to solve problems with words instead of weapons. In 3,000 years, they had never failed to make peace between fighting worlds. If anyone could get humans to talk, it would be them. Approaching the edge of human space, reported the ship's pilot, a young Kalari with bright blue skin and large, kind eyes. All sensors show normal readings. Selandra stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars ahead. She was old for her people, with silver streaks in her blue skin that showed her wisdom and experience. Any response to our messages? She asked. None, Ambassador, replied the communications officer. We have sent greetings in 47 different languages, including all known human dialects. We have tried every frequency humans have ever used. Complete silence. Beside Selandra stood Morgeth of the Zentauran people. He was tall and thin, with large black eyes that could see emotions like other people saw colors. The Zentaurans could feel what others were feeling from very far away. What do you sense, old friend? Salandra asked him. Morgoth closed his eyes and reached out with his mind. His face became troubled. Something is wrong, he said slowly. I can feel humans at the edge of my range, but their emotions are strange. Strange how? Sad, Morgoth said, opening his eyes. Very sad, but also determined. Like someone who has made a terrible but necessary choice. And there are so many of them working together. It is as if the entire human species has become one mind with one purpose. The fleet continued forward until they reached the first human warning beacons. These were small satellites that told visitors they were entering human space. Usually, they would also provide instructions for peaceful contact. Today, they only sent one message. We appreciate your concern. We are fine. Please leave. Salandra tried to open a direct communication channel. This is Ambassador Salandra of the Galactic Council. We come in peace seeking dialogue. May we approach Earth to discuss matters of mutual concern? The same message repeated. We appreciate your concern. We are fine. Please leave. Try a different approach, Salandra told her communications officer. Send them our diplomatic credentials. Explain that we are here to help, not to threaten. They sent detailed information about the fleet, its peaceful mission, and the Council's growing worry about human isolation. They offered medical aid, trade opportunities, and cultural exchange. They promised that no weapons were armed and that they only wanted to talk. The response was exactly the same. We appreciate your concern. We are fine. Please leave. Hours passed as the fleet tried different ways to make contact. They used old friendship codes from before the silence began. They sent messages from species that had been humanity's closest allies. They even tried having the ship's computers send mathematical formulas and scientific data, hoping to start any kind of communication. Nothing worked. The same polite but firm message kept repeating. Permission to move deeper into the system? Asked the fleet commander, a military officer from the hegemony. Salandra looked at Morgoth, who nodded. Granted, she said, but keep all weapons powered down. We are here to talk, nothing more. The fleet moved forward, passing the orbit of Pluto, then Neptune. As they got closer to the inner planets, they began to see signs of human activity. Ships moved between worlds, carrying cargo and passengers. Space stations orbited several planets, bigger and more advanced than anything humans had built before. But none of the human ships responded to contact attempts. They simply continued their work as if the Council fleet was not there. This is very strange, said the fleet commander. They are not acting like they are afraid of us or angry at us. They are acting like we do not exist. When the fleet reached the orbit of Mars, something unusual happened. Their navigation systems began suggesting different routes, not forcing them to change course, but making other directions seem more interesting or important. Sir, the pilot reported, I keep feeling like we should check out that asteroid belt instead of going to Earth. It seems like there might be something important there. Other ships in the fleet reported the same thing. Their crews were getting strong feelings that they should explore different areas, meet with distant space stations, or investigate unusual energy readings in empty space. Morgoth grabbed Salandra's arm. This is not natural, he said urgently. Someone or something is trying to make us want to go away. Not forcing us, but making us think going somewhere else is our own idea. Can you fight it? I can resist it because I know what it is, Morgoth replied. But it is very subtle. If I was not actively looking for mental influence, I would probably think these new ideas were my own. Salandra ordered the fleet to stay together and continue toward Earth. As they got closer, the strange suggestions got stronger. Several ships asked permission to investigate important signals they had detected in other directions. Their crews genuinely believed they were making smart tactical decisions. Hold formation, Salandra commanded. Whatever is doing this, We will not be turned away so easily. They reached Earth's orbit to find a beautiful blue and green world surrounded by hundreds of defensive satellites and space stations. The technology looked human, but far more advanced than anything they had seen before. The defensive systems powered up but did not fire. Instead, they broadcast the same message. We appreciate your concern. We are fine. Please leave. Earth Control, this is Ambassador Salandra. We have traveled very far to speak with your leaders. Please allow us to send a small shuttle to your planet for peaceful talks. We appreciate your concern. We are fine. Please leave. Salandra tried everything she could think of. She offered gifts, shared news from other worlds, even told them about friends and allies who were worried about human silence. Nothing changed the response. Morgeth suddenly grabbed his head in pain. There are so many minds down there, he said, breathing hard. Millions and millions of humans, all working together on something huge. They are not angry at us, Salandra. They are protecting us. Protecting us from what? I do not know, Morgeth replied. But whatever it is, they think it is worse than losing all their galactic friends. After 6 hours of trying every diplomatic technique known to the Council, Salandra finally gave the order to withdraw. As the fleet moved away from Earth, the strange mental pressure to explore other areas faded. On the journey back to Council space, they tried to contact human colonies and ships they encountered. Every attempt failed in the same way. Humans remained polite, but completely unwilling to communicate. 2 more diplomatic missions were sent over the following months. A trade fleet offering valuable resources got the same treatment. A scientific expedition hoping to share important discoveries was ignored completely. Even a cultural exchange program featuring art and music from hundreds of worlds could not get humans to respond. Each mission returned with the same report. Humans were not hostile, but they had completely cut themselves off from galactic society. They were building something in their space, working with a unity and purpose no one had ever seen before, and they would not explain what they were doing or why. The Galactic Council began to realize that humanity's silence was not temporary. Whatever had caused them to withdraw was serious enough to make them abandon everything they had built with other species. And the most frightening part was that no one could figure out what threat could be so terrible that humanity would choose complete isolation over asking their friends for help. In the archives of a dozen worlds, scholars began searching through ancient records, looking for any clue about what could make an entire species disappear from galactic politics overnight. What they would find would change everything they thought they knew about their universe. Dr. Vexara descended into the deepest levels of the ruins on Keth Moran, her headlamp cutting through darkness that had lasted for 1,000,000 years. The ancient precursor city stretched far underground, filled with strange technology that still hummed with power after all this time. She was a xenoarchaeologist, someone who studied the remains of old civilizations. The precursors were the oldest race anyone knew about. They had built cities across the galaxy long before any current species had learned to make fire. Then, suddenly, they had all disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and mysteries. "Computer, scan this wall section," Vexara said, pointing her device at strange symbols carved into black stone. "Language match found," her computer replied in a pleasant voice. "This appears to be high precursor script, dating approximately 1,000,000 years old. Beginning translation." Vexara had been searching these ruins for 3 months, looking for anything that might explain what was happening with humanity. Other scholars thought she was wasting her time, but she had a feeling that the answer lay somewhere in the ancient past. The wall lit up as her scanner worked, revealing layer after layer of text that had been invisible before. The symbols glowed with soft blue light as the computer slowly translated the alien writing. "Translation complete," the computer announced. "Would you like me to read the text aloud?" "Yes, and record everything," Vexara said, pulling out her notebook. The computer began to speak in its calm voice. Warning to future civilizations. We leave this record as our final gift and greatest warning. The Devourers have come again, as they always do, as they always will. Vexara's hand stopped moving. She had never heard of anything called Devourers in any precursor text before. Continue, she whispered. The pattern repeats every 50,000 years. First, the Devourers send whispers across the dimensional barriers. These whispers plant ideas in the minds of the most social species, ideas that seem wise and good, but slowly poison relationships between worlds. The text described creatures that lived between dimensions, feeding on the psychic energy that came from fear, anger, and death. They could not enter normal space directly, but they could influence thoughts and feelings across the dimensional divide. The Devourers are patient, the translation continued. They spend decades building tension between species. They make trade disputes seem more important than they are. They turn small disagreements into major conflicts. They use the galaxy's own communication networks to spread their influence like a disease. Vexara felt her blood turn cold as she read. This sounded very much like some of the problems the Galactic Council had been dealing with recently. Trade wars that seemed to start over nothing, alliances breaking apart for reasons no one could quite remember. Species that had been friends for centuries, suddenly unable to trust each other. When enough anger and fear fills the galaxy, the Devourers create a great war, not one species against another, but many species against many others. The psychic energy from billions of deaths gives them the power to break through into our dimension permanently. The wall showed pictures now, images that made Vexara sick to look at. Vast battles between species she recognized from ancient history. Entire worlds burning. And in the darkness between the stars, shapes that hurt to see directly, feeding on the pain and terror of dying civilizations. We tried to warn the other species of our time, the text continued, but the whispers were already in their minds. Our warnings sounded like the ravings of a paranoid race trying to start trouble. The more we insisted that hidden enemies were manipulating everyone, the more other species began to distrust us. Vexara realized what had happened to the precursors. They had discovered the truth, but by the time they understood what was happening, it was too late to convince anyone else. However, we discovered something important about the Devourer's power. They cannot influence all species equally. Some minds are naturally resistant to their whispers. These rare species serve as circuit breakers. When they detect the manipulation, their immunity can disrupt the network of influence. The next section made Vexara's hands shake as she read it. The species with the strongest immunity appears in our galaxy's spiral arm approximately 50,000 years after each great cleansing. They are social creatures who value individual thought above group consensus. Their neural patterns create static that interferes with dimensional manipulation. They will be humanity's children or humanity's ancestors, depending on when this record is found. Humanity, Vexara breathed. They're talking about humanity. She read faster now, desperate to understand. When the immune species detects the Devourer's influence, they have two choices. They can try to warn others and be dismissed as troublemakers, eventually being used as vectors to complete the manipulation network. Or they can cut themselves off completely from all galactic communication, sacrificing their place in civilization to prevent the Devourers from reaching them. The wall showed more pictures. A species that looked remarkably like humans, but older and more primitive, making the same choice. They had withdrawn from their galactic community, watching sadly as other species fell under the Devourer's influence. The immune species becomes the galaxy's guardians, working in isolation to destroy the dimensional anchor points that allow the Devourers to maintain their influence. This work is dangerous and must be done alone. Any contact with influenced species can compromise their immunity. Vexara's mind raced as she connected the pieces. The human ships spotted in unexplored regions weren't running away or preparing for war. They were hunting. They were finding and destroying the things that let the Devourers influence the galaxy. The final section of this record contains detailed information about detecting and destroying dimensional anchor points, the computer announced. However, this information has been encoded in a way that can only be understood by immune species. It will appear as meaningless symbols to any influenced mind. Vexara stared at the wall where complex mathematical formulas and star charts were carved. To her, they looked like random scratches and meaningless numbers, but if she was right, humans would be able to read them perfectly. She spent the next week in the ruins, copying everything she could find. The more she read, the more frightened she became. The precursor records showed that the galaxy was already deep into the manipulation cycle. Species throughout known space were becoming more aggressive, more suspicious, more willing to fight over small problems. Most terrifying of all, she found a timeline. According to the ancient records, the Great War always began exactly 51 months after the immune species first detected the threat and went into isolation. Vexara counted the months since humanity had withdrawn from galactic society. 47 months had passed. They had 4 months left. She gathered her most trusted allies, Captain Theron from the Military Intelligence Division and High Analyst Meredith from the Council's Science Department. She brought them to her private office and shared what she had discovered. "This is impossible," Theron said after reviewing her evidence. "You're suggesting that invisible creatures from another dimension have been manipulating galactic politics for millions of years." "Look at the patterns," Vexara replied, spreading out charts and data on her desk. "The trade wars that started 3 years ago, the breakdown of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, the sudden territorial disputes between species that had lived peacefully for centuries, every single one matches the precursor descriptions of devourer influence." Meredith studied the ancient star charts. "If this is true, then humanity hasn't abandoned us. They've been protecting us by staying away. And they've been hunting the source of the problem," Vexara added. "Every unexplored region where human ships have been spotted corresponds to locations the precursors identified as potential anchor points." Captain Theron looked grim. "How long do we have?" "According to the timeline, the final phase begins in 4 months. That's when the Devourers will have enough accumulated tension to trigger a galaxy-wide war. Once that happens, they break through permanently, and our civilization ends." The three of them sat in silence, understanding the horrible truth. Humanity had made the ultimate sacrifice, giving up everything they valued about galactic society to wage a secret war against an enemy no one else could see. But the sacrifice might not be enough. The ancient record suggested that the immune species usually failed, managing only to delay the inevitable by a few years. The Devourers had been playing this game for millions of years, and they had won almost every time. "What do we do?" Meredith asked. Vexara looked at the ancient warnings spread across her desk. "We do what the precursors could not. We find a way to prove the truth before it's too late. And we pray that humanity's plan is better than anything that came before." Outside her office window, the lights of 100 different species ships twinkled in the darkness, their crews unaware that they were living in the final months of galactic civilization. Unless 3 scholars and a species that no longer spoke to anyone could somehow stop a threat that had destroyed every previous galaxy it had encountered. Captain Theron stared at the data screens in Vexara's secret laboratory, his face growing paler with each file he opened. For 2 weeks, the small group had been quietly investigating recent council decisions, looking for signs of the influence Vexara had described in the ancient records. What they found was worse than any of them had imagined. "This trade route changed from 6 months ago," Theron said, pointing at a complex star map. "On the surface, it looks like a smart economic decision. But look at the real result. The map showed shipping lanes that had been redirected through contested space. What should have been a minor route adjustment had created friction between three different species as cargo ships began competing for the same stations and resources. "And this one," added Meredith, pulling up another file. "The Council voted to change the rules for colonizing new worlds. The new rules seem fair, but they make it much easier for species to claim the same planet by accident." Vexara nodded grimly. "Every single policy change in the past 2 years follows the same pattern. They all seem reasonable when you look at them individually, but together they create tension and conflict." She activated a holographic display that showed the council chamber. "Watch this recording from the vote on the trade route changes." The recording showed Ambassador Veltar giving a speech about economic efficiency. Her words were logical and well-reasoned. The vote passed by a large margin with very little debate. "Now watch her face," Vexara said, zooming in on the ambassador. In the close-up view, they could see something strange in Veltar's eyes. A distant look, as if she was listening to something no one else could hear. Her voice had a flat quality, lacking the passion she usually showed when speaking about trade issues. "She's not evil," Vexara explained. "She genuinely believes she's making good decisions, but something is gently pushing her thoughts in a specific direction." Theron opened more files. "I've been checking the military reports from the past year. Look at this pattern of exercises and readiness drills." The data showed that military forces throughout the galaxy had been gradually repositioning themselves. Each movement was justified by reasonable concerns about security or training needs, but when seen together, they formed a clear picture of species preparing for conflict. The Devourers aren't just influencing trade and politics, Theron realized. They're getting everyone ready for war without anyone realizing it. Meredith pulled up communication records from the Council's main computer system. "I've been analyzing message patterns between member species. The amount of angry or suspicious communication has increased by 300% in the past 18 months. "But people don't notice because it happens slowly," Vexara said. "Each message seems like a natural response to the previous one. No single conversation crosses the line, but the overall tone keeps getting worse." The three of them worked through the night, finding more evidence of subtle manipulation. Budget decisions that reduced funding for peace programs while increasing military spending. Diplomatic protocols that made it harder to resolve disputes quickly. Cultural exchange programs that were quietly canceled due to scheduling conflicts. "The entities are already here," Vexara said, as the sun rose outside her laboratory windows. "They've been influencing key people in the Council for years. Maybe decades." "How many people are affected?" Theron asked. "Probably most of the leadership," Meredith replied, looking at her analysis. "But not completely controlled, just guided. Their basic personalities are the same, but their decision-making is being nudged in directions that serve the Devourers." Vexara picked up one of the precursor artifacts she had brought back from the ruins. It looked like a crystal sphere with strange symbols floating inside it. "According to the records, there's a way to communicate that the entities can't monitor," she said. "The precursors built devices that send messages through folded space-time instead of normal space. The Devourers exist between dimensions, so they can't intercept this kind of communication." "You want to contact humanity directly?" Theron asked. "It's the only way. If we try to use normal communication channels, the entities will know we've discovered them. They might decide to trigger the war early." It took 3 days to activate the precursor device. The ancient technology was far beyond anything the current galaxy understood, but Vexara had studied enough of their records to make basic adjustments. When the device finally activated, it filled the room with a soft musical humming. Symbols appeared in the air, forming words in several different languages. "Transmission ready," the device announced in perfect galactic standard. Warning: This communication method bypasses normal space-time. Messages sent through this system cannot be detected or blocked by dimensional entities. Vexara composed a careful message explaining who they were and what they had discovered. She included copies of all their evidence and asked for confirmation of humanity's situation. The reply came within an hour. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Deep Space Command," the voice said, transmitted directly into their minds rather than through their ears. "We confirm everything you have discovered. The situation is worse than you know." The 3 council members listened in amazement as Chen explained humanity's true situation. "We first detected the dimensional influence 11 months ago when our psychics started reporting strange whispers in their minds," Chen said. "At first we thought it was some kind of weapon being used against us by an enemy species, but our investigation led us to the same conclusions you reached." "Why didn't you warn us?" Meredith asked. "We tried subtle warnings at first," Chen replied. "But every time we mentioned our concerns to other species, we could see the influence getting stronger in their representatives. We realized that the entities were using our warnings as a way to spread faster through the communication networks." "So, you withdrew completely," Vexara said. "It was the hardest decision our species has ever made. We knew you would think we had betrayed our friendships, but the alternative was watching the entities use us to complete their control over the galaxy." Chen's voice became heavy with sadness. "Do you know what it's like to deliberately become the villains in the story, to watch your friends worry about you and not be able to explain? We've spent 11 months saying goodbye to everything we loved about galactic civilization." "What have you been doing in isolation?" Theron asked. "Hunting," Chen replied. "The precursor records you found contain detailed instructions for locating and destroying dimensional anchor points. These are physical objects in normal space that the entities use to maintain their influence. We've destroyed 47 anchor points so far." "Is it working?" "Not well enough. The entities have been preparing for this cycle for decades. They have hundreds of anchor points scattered throughout the galaxy. Every time we destroy one, they activate 3 more. "We're losing the race!" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "How long do we have?" Vexara asked quietly. "According to our calculations, the entities will trigger the final war in exactly 73 days, Chen said. "By that time, they'll have enough accumulated tension and conflict to break through permanently. Once they're fully in our dimension, destroying anchor points won't matter anymore." "What's your plan?" Theron asked. Chen's voice became very quiet. "The only solution we can see is to collapse the entire galactic communication network. Every subspace relay, every quantum entanglement communicator, every faster-than-light message system in the galaxy, all of it has to be destroyed simultaneously." "That would end civilization as we know it," Meredith said in horror. "Yes," Chen agreed. "It would take decades to rebuild. Millions of worlds would be cut off from each other. Trade would collapse. But it would also sever the entity's ability to coordinate their influenced pawns. Without galaxy-wide communication, they can't trigger a galaxy-wide war." "And you're prepared to do this?" "We're prepared to be hated by every species in the galaxy for the rest of history," Chen said. "But we're not prepared to watch everyone die." Vexara looked at her 2 companions. In their eyes, she saw the same terrible understanding she felt. Humanity had already made their choice. They would destroy galactic civilization to save it, accepting blame and hatred as the price of survival. "Is there any other way?" she asked. "There might be," Chen replied slowly. "But it would require other species to break free from the influence on their own. It would require them to believe the truth about the entities and act against their own manipulated instincts." "We'll try," Vexara promised. "We'll find a way to prove the truth." "You have 72 days, Chen said. "After that, we trigger our plan whether the galaxy understands it or not. We won't let everyone die just to avoid being blamed for saving them." The communication ended, leaving the 3 of them alone in the humming laboratory. Outside, the galaxy continued its normal business, unaware that its entire future depended on convincing people to fight against thoughts that felt like their own ideas. They had 72 days to do what no species in galactic history had ever managed: break free from the Devourer's influence before it was too late. And if they failed, humanity would push the button that would save everyone while making themselves the most hated species in galactic history. The countdown had begun. 59 days remained when everything started falling apart. Vexara was in the Council archives, desperately copying more precursor records when alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as speakers announced that all representatives should report to the main chamber immediately. She ran through the corridors with her precious data, her heart pounding. Something was very wrong. The council chamber was in chaos when she arrived. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting at each other in languages that made the translation computers spark and smoke. At the center of it all, Ambassador Veltar was demanding immediate military action against the hegemony worlds. "They have been stealing our trade routes for months," Veltar screamed, her usually calm demeanor completely gone. "We cannot allow this insult to continue." From across the chamber, the hegemony representative roared back, "Your accusations are lies. It is your people who have been attacking our cargo ships." Vexara pushed through the crowd toward where Theron and Meredith were sitting. The patterns they had been tracking for weeks were suddenly accelerating. The gentle influence that had been building tension was now pushing everyone toward open conflict. "It's starting," Meredith whispered when Vexara reached them. "The entities are moving to the final phase early." "Why now?" Vexara asked, watching as more species joined the angry arguments. "Look at the communication logs," Theron replied, showing her his datapad. "Something happened 3 hours ago. Massive data transfers between all the major species. It's like someone flipped a switch and turned up the anger." Around them, the shouting grew louder. Species that had been friends for centuries were now accusing each other of crimes and betrayals. Military commanders were calling for immediate strikes against former allies. "They know," Vexara realized with horror. "The entities know we've been investigating. They're triggering the war early to stop us." At that moment, a new voice cut through the chaos. It came from the station's main communication system, broadcasting on every frequency at once. "Attention, Galactic Council," the voice said. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Deep Space Command. We are broadcasting on an emergency override frequency. Please listen carefully to what we have to say." The chamber fell silent. Every representative turned to look at the speakers, shocked to hear from humans after almost a year of silence. "For 11 months, humanity has maintained communication silence for reasons we could not explain without making the situation worse," Chen continued. "Today, we must break that silence because your lives depend on understanding the truth." Chen's voice was calm but urgent as she explained everything Vexara had discovered in the archives. She told them about the Devourers, about the cycle of manipulation and war that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. "The anger you are feeling right now is not your own," Chen said. "The urgent need to attack your neighbors is not based on real threats. You are being manipulated by entities from another dimension who feed on war and death." Some representatives began to object, but Chen continued speaking. "Dr. Vexara of your archaeological division has discovered the truth in ancient precursor ruins. Captain Theron and High Analyst Meredith have documented the manipulation in your recent council decisions. We are uploading all evidence to your systems now using communication methods the entities cannot block." Vexara watched as data screens throughout the chamber began displaying the precursor warnings, the patterns of influence they had tracked, and humanity's secret war against the dimensional anchor points. "This is impossible!" someone shouted. "Invisible creatures from another dimension? You expect us to believe this fantasy?" But even as the words were spoken, some representatives were beginning to look confused. The anger that had been driving them minutes before was starting to fade as they saw the evidence. Those with natural resistance to mental influence were the first to break free. Chen's voice became more urgent. The entities are trying to trigger the final war right now, 60 days ahead of schedule, because they know their secret has been discovered. In approximately 1 hour, they will activate their remaining anchor points simultaneously. Every species in the galaxy will suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to attack everyone else. "What can we do?" asked the representative from the Peaceful Worlds Alliance, her voice shaky but clear. "We have prepared for this moment," Chen replied. "Human ships are positioned near every known anchor point in the galaxy, but we cannot destroy them all simultaneously without help. We need other species to target the anchor points in their own territory." New data appeared on the screens showing the locations of dimensional anchor points throughout Council space. They were hidden inside space stations, buried on planets, even built into some of the Council's own communication relays. "The entities have been preparing this trap for decades," Chen explained. "They built their anchor points into the infrastructure you trust most. To stop them, you will have to destroy things that seem important to your civilization." Captain Theron stood up in the chamber. "I can confirm the accuracy of this data," he announced. "I have been investigating these patterns for weeks. The evidence is real." More representatives began to speak up as the artificial anger faded from their minds. Some confirmed that they had been having strange dreams lately, dreams that suggested attacking other species was necessary. Others admitted that recent decisions had felt unlike their normal thinking. "How long do we have?" asked the ethereal representative, its energy form flickering with concern. 37 minutes, Chen replied. "At that point, the entities will push the mental influence beyond anything you've felt before. The urge to fight will become impossible to resist. You will genuinely believe that immediate war is the only solution to every problem." The chamber erupted in activity as representatives began contacting their homeworlds. Military commanders who had been demanding war minutes earlier were now organizing strikes against the anchor points in their territory. "This is Admiral Chen to all human forces," came the announcement. "Operation Circuit Breaker is now active. Begin simultaneous strikes on all confirmed anchor points in 60 seconds. On the main display, a galaxy-wide map showed thousands of tiny lights representing anchor points scattered across known space. As the countdown began, green dots began appearing wherever human ships reached their targets. But there were too many targets, and not enough human ships to handle them all. "Hegemony forces moving to assist," announced the military commander who had been calling for war earlier. "We have ships near 17 anchor points in our sector." "Aquatic Union confirming strike readiness at 9 locations," added Veltar, her voice now clear and determined instead of artificially angry. Species after species began coordinating attacks on the anchor points in their space. The artificial conflicts that had seemed so important minutes earlier were forgotten as the galaxy united against the real threat. 60 seconds to simultaneous strike, Chen announced. "Remember, these attacks must happen at exactly the same time. If the entities detect the assault before we hit them all, they will trigger the war immediately." The countdown reached 0. Across the galaxy, thousands of ships fired at once. Ancient technology that had been hidden for decades was destroyed in minutes. The map on the chamber's main screen showed anchor points winking out like dying stars. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. Then, like a weight being lifted from their minds, every being in the chamber felt a clarity they hadn't experienced in months. "Additional anchor points detected," Chen reported. "The entities had backup systems we didn't know about. Second wave strikes beginning now." The battle continued for 6 hours as hidden anchor points were discovered and destroyed throughout the galaxy. Each time they thought they had found them all, scanners detected more. The entities had been planning this for far longer than anyone had imagined. Finally, as the station's clock showed late evening, Chen's voice came through the speakers one last time. "All confirmed anchor points have been destroyed," she announced. "Dimensional monitoring shows that entity influence has been reduced to background levels. The immediate threat is over." The chamber filled with exhausted relief. Representatives who had been ready to kill each other that morning were now working together to coordinate recovery efforts. "What happens now?" asked Vexara. "Now we rebuild," Chen replied. "But differently. We've learned that galaxy-wide communication networks can be used against us. We'll need better security, better monitoring, and species like humanity who can detect influence when it starts again." "When it starts again?" Meredith asked. "The precursor record suggests this cycle repeats every 50,000 years. We've stopped this attempt, but the entities still exist in their dimension. Eventually, they'll try again with new methods." The chamber was quiet as everyone understood what this meant. "Humanity will continue to serve as monitors," Chen said. "We'll stay partially isolated, maintaining just enough contact to watch for signs of new influence. It's not the life we wanted, but it's the role the galaxy needs us to play." "You don't have to do this alone," Vexara said. "Other species can help. We can train people to recognize the signs, create backup systems, build defenses." "That would be welcome," Chen replied, and for the first time in months, there was warmth in her voice. Over the following weeks, the galaxy slowly returned to normal. Trade resumed, conflicts were resolved through actual diplomacy instead of artificial anger, and species began working together again. But things were different now. Communication networks had new security measures, decision-making processes included checks for outside influence, and throughout the galaxy, monitoring stations staffed by multiple species watched for any signs that the devourers might be returning. Humanity rejoined galactic society, but they remained different. They kept some of their ships in the empty spaces between stars, always watching, always ready to cut themselves off again if necessary. They had become the galaxy's immune system, the guardians who would sacrifice friendship for survival if the choice had to be made again. The galaxy was safe, but at a cost. Everyone now knew that their thoughts could be influenced, their emotions manipulated, their civilizations destroyed by enemies they couldn't see or fight directly. The age of innocence was over. But in return, they had gained something valuable. The knowledge that when the worst threat imaginable had faced them, different species had chosen to work together instead of destroying each other. Even under the influence of ancient entities, the galaxy's peoples had been strong enough to break free when shown the truth. Humanity had been willing to be hated to save everyone. The galaxy had been willing to trust them when it mattered most. And together they had proven that some bonds are stronger than any manipulation, some friendships deeper than any fear, and some species brave enough to guard the darkness so others can live in the light.